the whole idea behind this is to have conversations with people that have unique insights all along the pipeline. So whether that's in the marketing side, which is, I guess where our discussions can start to go, who knows?
Right.
By the
I
way,
actually I sit all along the pipeline.
okay,
That's the beauty
cool.
of product. That's the beauty of product marketing
Right.
is product marketing doesn't, at any point in the sales process, we don't disappear. We're there with the sales guy right alongside. Now the clients don't see us, but they do see what we do. So we actually, like, our salespeople don't write their own presentations. They don't, like, that's all me. Every
Right.
single step, like my presenter notes, my scripts, everything is in the room.
That's awesome. And
But
you always have to get that feedback. I mean, I want to kind of break this down in context,
yeah,
but just out of curiosity right now, you're always getting that feedback basically all the time, right? So that you can
so
adjust.
I have key salespeople that I meet with on like a at least weekly basis, if not bi-weekly or 3 times a week, that I know are more active salespeople or are hitting a particular vertical that I might be struggling with, and they have messaging from the field or they have insight into the field that I don't get without them. But at the same time, they also don't necessarily get my side of things, which is the ability to translate what the R&D does into sales material, into easily digestible sales material from when I sit down with the R&D team and the product team, which is a highly technical brief. So the way we look at product marketing is it's almost at the apex of everything because we're involved in customer success and helping customer success through different marketing techniques to get that contract extension, right? At the rebirth of the contract phase. But I'm also there, from the marketing points at the beginning, setting up the campaign fee. Like, I'm not setting up the campaigns physically in Google Ads, but I am setting up the campaign themes, doing the creative direction. What is the terminology we're going to use? What is the tonality of the campaign? What are the white papers? What are the blog posts? What are the emails even we're going to use? And then once leads come in and we're having contact with them, I actually write out all the white papers that are used across the sales funnel and all the presentations that are used. And we're also involved in pricing or involved in the strategy around pricing. So product marketing is kind of like at the apex of everything. So you're really good at a whole bunch of things, but you're not excellent at anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So salespeople are excellent at closing and selling. Right. Campaign managers are excellent in Google and Facebook and LinkedIn. Customer success people are great at customer service and making people feel great and making people feel wanted. And product marketing is the guys who sit above that and look at all that and say, strategically, here's where we need to move. And then tactically, how do we do that?
Now, obviously, with your role, you're in an industry that is super, at least from an outsider's perspective, right? Super congested, right? Cybersecurity, cyber IT, just in general. There's so many different iterations, right? And so standing out or positioning yourselves is obviously one of those, I would assume, one of the critical pieces there. What are the building blocks there when it comes to like differentiating yourself, differentiating your offering, or at least just getting heard, right, when you present yourself out there in the space?
Right. So it's funny because a bit of my history, but I come from the currency space and the international payment space, and that's an extremely crowded market. And standing out is really hard because from a product side, everyone has the exact same product, right? And the first thing that people do, because it's finance and you're dealing with a persona that is driven by financial efficiency, you're running to show how much money you can save them. And with currency transfer, one of the things one of the decisions that we made was that we're not going to play that game. Let everyone else have that conversation. Because ultimately, for the way the world is moving, if someone is only willing to talk to you when it's about price, you as a company are never going to win.
Right.
Because you're in a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
And when you're in a race to the bottom, every company fails. Unless you have one company that comes in and says, listen, I've got $600 million in the bank. I can afford to lose $100 million a year for the next 2-3 years until everyone else is wiped out. And then I'll raise my prices again when I'm the only person. No one in the startup world has that level of flexibility or that much cash in the bank that they can make that move. So you have to start thinking about different ways that you're going to position yourself. And it really comes down to positioning from the top, from the first time that someone interacts with your brand, which could be even off your website, off your content, off of social. It might be in an article they read about you. And your messaging and your positioning has to be really strong. So the decision we made at Currency Transfer was we're not going to focus on private client as much as we used to, even though it was a great part of our business, because with private client, you are really just winning on price. And we're going to focus on business and start to differentiate on a product level. So we started taking a look at where inefficiencies occur across the process of international payments. And one of the things that we found was that there are still people in finance who make manual payments. Let's say I'm paying 150 overseas employees in 5 different currencies. They're still making every single one of those 150 individual payments, which means that payroll takes 2 weeks. We managed to whip up a solution in about a month that automated the entire thing, built on top of the currency transfer marketplace. And all of a sudden, we're not having a conversation about price. We're having a conversation about resource savings and tying a monetary value based on salary to giving someone what used to take them 2 weeks. We were doing in under 10 minutes.
So just on those points, I mean, firstly, going back to what you were saying before in terms of as a product marketer, you're watching all aspects of the funnel. So internally, you've got kind of this, eye in the sky, right? Your feelers are out. You're always getting, like you said, which I think is also a very important point that I want to come back to later. But you'll get feedback, let's say, from the sales team who are living in that experience every day and can provide live, valuable content and information. But then even before that, right, you're having to pay attention to the market, trends in the market, changes, product offerings, competition, and also predict it, right? Like make a call to say, hey, if everyone's doing this and we try to do the same thing, it's not going to work out for us. We have to differentiate ourselves. Okay, on a product level, can we differentiate ourselves, or on a messaging level, or on a target level, right? Maybe we go after a complete different audience. What forms the building blocks of that? Like, let's say today you're a new cyber company, or in any one of these types of spaces. You're a marketing technology company. You are a currency company, and you've come in. You've got maybe a new version, a better iteration of what's happening currently. How do you start by saying, hey, all right, I want to stand out. I want to build a known brand. I want to get clients. I want to grow my company, but I know that people are going to maybe get distracted by the noise, or I'm not even going to get through to them. What are the first steps to doing that? How do you build that?
I mean, so the first thing you do is take a look at the market, right? And you have to take a look at the market from both your standpoint and your competitor's standpoint. So in cyber specifically, you're dealing with something that has a huge budget, but at the same time is a strained resource. So specifically what Cyberbit does is we're in the cybersecurity training space, and that's a bit of an open market right now. There's a lot of players there, but not a lot of players doing what Cyberbit does. What Cyberbit does is hyper-realistic simulation training. So think about it like this. A fighter pilot, before they can even take off, has to do 150 hours in a simulator. Cyberbit has the same thing. We're putting cybersecurity analysts, SOC analysts, penetration testers into a simulator. That's right. So for blue team members, for people who are part of the incident response team, they're coming in and they're training against real world attacks that are multi-stage attacks. They're not these tiny labs that are going to show you a little snippet of an attack, but it's a full attack. And so from a product level, we're very, very differentiated. because we're doing something that very few other players are doing. And we're kind of a step above where some of the other players are from a technology standpoint. And I can't obviously reveal our future plans, but it's one of those things where we have people who have a lower level of technology are going after the same budget that we are. So even though they're not directly in our competitive set, we are competing with them for budget dollars. And that's something that's really important to understand, is that there might be someone who is an indirect competitor, but is still competing for the same budget. So when you're looking at your competition, you're looking at market landscape, you can't just understand, okay, well, I have these 4 competitors, and what are they doing? You have to understand every single player who's also competing for that budget, right? So if you're a SOAR platform, right, which is security automation, orchestration, automation, and response, like Demisto, which is owned by Splunk and a whole bunch of other players out there, you have to sit there and go, listen, from a technology level, it's really hard to differentiate as a SOAR, right? So some that might be technologically a bit better, right? They might have some AI built into their SOAR platform that automates, okay, this is going to be which analyst is going to receive which incident, because they're better with certain incident types, right? We're seeing that start to come up in the space. But from a non-technology level, SOAR is also competing with endpoint protection. They're also competing with firewalls. They're also competing with next-gen antivirus. They're competing with all of those tools as well for budget, right? Because what most people don't understand is that for a CISO, tools isn't even their number one budget item. And the number one thing that maybe a SOAR company or a firewall company or a next-gen antivirus or an endpoint protection company, they're forgetting that they're also competing against salary for budget. Because cybersecurity is a tremendously expensive industry because there's not enough people out there. So those who are good, or those who have the skills, are getting paid a ton. So understand you're competing against a whole slew of companies. And now you have to differentiate. Now you have to make yourself, when you go to a CISO, when you go to a VP security, to a senior SOC director, when you go and speak to them in sales, you have to understand that when you're making that pitch, you're not just pitching against your competition, you're pitching against every other software tool and salary that is inside the cybersecurity budget. Now that you understand that, understand the goal you're trying to accomplish. What is the problem you're trying to solve, and how are you solving that? And you need to make your value prop, you need to make it clear from the first instance. So for example, at Cyberbit, our value prop is that we prepare your cybersecurity team for a real event, right? 90% of cybersecurity professionals have never even experienced a live attack, which is insane if you consider the amount of attacks that are happening every single year.
Right.
They're just only finding out about them after the fact. So what we do is prepare them for a live attack. And the way that we go up against the rest of the market is by saying, listen, your tools are awesome, your tools are great. But what isn't great is the fact that the people who are using those tools aren't necessarily even trained on how to use them properly. So before you make a massive investment into a CrowdStrike, into a Demisto, into a firewall from Palo Alto Networks, first let's get your people up to speed. Then let's give them the tools that they know how to use. And we train them on commercial grade tools on Cyberbit Range. So that's kind of how we prepare ourselves, not just for the market that we're competing in, but for the cybersecurity market as a whole. Because you're right, it is a crowded space. But differentiating yourself, let's say if you're a company like CyberArk, who's doing identity access management, or someone brought me a multi-factor authentication company the other day that they wanted me to help out with. The first question I always ask is, well, how are you competing against the pieces of cybersecurity that have nothing to do with your product? Because people don't have a firewall budget and an EPP budget and a next-gen antivirus budget. They have a cybersecurity budget. How that breaks down depends on the pricing of the tools and the needs that they have. So you either have to be the most feature-rich tool that's ever existed and solve a ton of problems, or you need to be critical to the system to make sure to get access to a CISO to begin with, and B, to make it as a part of their budget.
So there's something really, really interesting that you shared that I think applies across the board, and I don't think enough people think about, right? Is who you're really competing against. Just taking it right back there is, most people, when they start a company, when they, even as they operate, they think of their nearest competitors, number one. And the nearest competitor does something, oh, we better do something back, or we're better than them, and this is the pitch deck against them. They think of the indirect competitors. People do think of that, right? Companies that maybe do something that maybe negates what you're doing or decreases the value of it. But the big one that I think you brought up is, the budget as one of those big items, let's say within the indirect competitor column. And when just kind of summarize it, when you look at competing for those budget dollars, you said either you've got to have more than anyone else has got, let's say in the case of Cyberbit, or you've got to be so clearly differentiated that it's obvious that you make that budget. And it's really interesting because obviously when it comes to technology, especially software, it's it's something that you can only be the only provider of it for so long, right? You don't have, if you are new to the space, whatever you've invented, right? I mean, I know you were at WalkMe for a time as well, right? I mean, as far as I understand, they created the space, right, that they're in.
They were the earliest major player in the space, right? So they invented the category with Gartner, that's for certain, but WalkMe had competition from the beginning. The difference was that WalkMe was more feature rich, right?
Okay.
And as a result, from both a product standpoint and a marketing standpoint, you had a really feature rich product that was significantly more advanced than anything else that was out on the market. You had a marketing team that was killing it with thought leadership, right? A product, an analyst relations guy, I think it was Boaz Amidor at the beginning, and I'm not sure who it was after he left, that I think it might have been Maor Ezer, who's the chief of staff there, who worked really hard with Gartner to get that category built. And I can speak from experience, working with Gartner is hard. They say no more often than they say yes. And you're just working so hard to position yourself as the leader. But once you position yourself as a leader, I mean, take WalkMe. Behind them, they've got WhatFix, who for some reason are coming in about $3,000 cheaper than WalkMe, but they're still $17,000 cheaper than everyone else. But they're offering the same feature set as they're not offering the same feature set as WalkMe. They're not offering, a deep learning machine that's learning how people use your product and then automatically putting them into walkthroughs when it senses they're confused, right? That's a really, really cool, efficient product, and it's making every employee more efficient. And then down at the bottom of the category, you've got Chameleon, who are selling for like $275 a month, and they're giving just that basic WalkMe set, right? Here's a balloon. When you set it to pop up, it will pop up.
Right.
Other than that, it's never going to happen. And knowing from a pricing standpoint that WalkMe does sit at the top, right? Which makes it even more impressive of how much of a market leader they are, because they have a price point, they have features that justify their price point. Because if you look at what their price point is doing with all the analytics they're giving around how people use platforms, around how people are using Salesforce, right? Salesforce might be the greatest, worst tool to ever hit marketing and sales.
Right.
It does so much, but as a result of it doing so much, it's impossible to use. And so WalkMe has WalkMe for Salesforce that just teaches you how to use Salesforce. And if you think about it, what do you want your salespeople to do? As a former leader of sales, right? You want them doing what?
Yeah, I want them to follow the process in Salesforce and log everything, and
But more importantly, how do you want most of their time being spent?
Working with clients, closing deals.
Right, selling.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to run an organization on Salesforce that doesn't have an immersive training tool, they're not spending their time selling. They're spending their time figuring out, how do I even find the lead inside Salesforce that I'm supposed to be talking to right now?
Right. Yep.
To add the notes that I need to add so that my VP sales doesn't have to call me into his office to find out, hey, you just had a 2-hour-long phone call. What did you talk about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And having that is really, really important. So it's finding that product market fit, but finding it in a way that is unique to your company.
Now, what about the stage of the development of that product? Because, I saw an interesting post from Udi Ledegor at Gong. And he had posted about, I think they were celebrating 1,000 clients. And he said something, a comment there, that you've always got to market yourself that you're 2 years ahead of where you already are. And I think that, like, specifically, let's scale back to Series A funded startups. You've got a product that does what is advertised to an extent, right? You don't want to necessarily market it out there as like, we're sort of on the way, because you do want to kind of you have to position yourselves relatively early, as you said. You've got to carve out your niche. You've got to really work, like, know that space well. You've got to come out really strong. At the same time, you don't want to overmarket something that's maybe not quite ready for it. And on the other side, you don't want to be too reserved, because then you're not really getting there. How do you find that mix, like that balance of saying, well, okay, I know the product is at this level. I need to present it or position it at this point. Is it a constantly evolving thing, or do you come out like, hey, we're the market leader and this is the greatest thing since sliced bread? What's the starting point there?
For me, the starting point always starts with transparency. Okay, so if you're a Series A startup, be a Series A startup. Don't try and lie about it, right? You have maybe 4 or 5, if you're a really well-funded Series A startup, 10, 15 developers, 1 sales guy, 1 marketing guy, the CEO who's doing a little bit of everything, maybe a product guy, probably not, right? Because the CEO is doing product, he's doing sales, he's doing marketing, he's doing customer success. And you don't lie about who you are. If your roadmap says that you're going to be a product leader, then position yourself as a product leader. But show the clients your roadmap, because they're buying, especially if they're buying into a Series A company, they're early adopters and they know they're buying into a journey. So keep it honest. We're buying into a journey. Use the fact that you're an early stage company and they're going to have better access to an executive team. They're going to have better access to the product team. They're going to have input into product roadmap. Get them to join your product council. Get them into a Slack group with your product team, with your R&D team. Make them feel like a part of the experience. Everyone wants that startup experience, right? It's this cool thing, right? I'll give you a story that happened today. So obviously we announced that we raised $70 million yesterday, which was a huge, huge announcement, especially during the current situation.
Yeah, it's massive. Congrats.
And I, being the wonderfully brilliant person who I am, walked into work wearing flip-flops, jeans, and a t-shirt today. Right? Which is how I normally dress, don't get me wrong. But the day after you raise $70 million, not the time to walk in and look completely not serious at all. But my CEO came over to me and he's like, you know what? It's hot outside. You're wearing flip-flops. I think I'm going to wear flip-flops tomorrow. And I don't think I've ever seen our CEO's feet before. But I think part of it is that he's realizing we just raised a ton of money. And yes, we're an established company. We've been around for 5 years. We're a market leader. But at the same time, everyone wants that startup experience. Our CEO even, right? He's moving from a world of very stiff corporate structure, right, into the startup world with a brand new startup investor and all these things. And we're just sitting there going like, hey, let's be that startup because it's cool. It's sexy. And let's be honest, it's what everyone really wants. Everyone wants their work environment to be like a startup. You're looking at J. Walter Thompson, which is one of the largest advertising agencies in the world, rolled out beanbags a few years ago as a seating option inside their open space that has no assigned desks. And you're talking about a brand that's 100-something years old, right? People want that. So offer them a chance to be a part of it. Yes, we're the market leader because the market is young. And yes, those guys might have this, but because we approach the market from this specific way, we approach our product from this specific way, we're going to be better than them. And if you sign on early, you get to be a part of that journey. You get to have influence on our product roadmap. You get to have direct access to our CEO. You get to have all these different things. Use it as a selling point. Stop being scared of who you are, right? I said the same thing, and you're going to have to mark this explicit, and I hope you don't mind. But I was sitting in an interview with one of the larger public companies in Israel for a global brand manager position. And I'm sitting with the VP marketing, who later on became the CMO. And I said to the guy's showing me one of his publicity stunts that he's got going on. And I turned to him and I said, stop being scared, right? You know what you're trying to say. You know what your message is. Don't say it halfway. Just say it. Fuck plastic. Right now, I didn't get the job, and I have no bitterness at all. But a month later, I see the guy's video come out, and he's got his big star saying "fuck plastic bottles."
That's awesome.
Right? And that went on to become one of the most iconic marketing campaigns of the last few years. And you just can't be scared. So stop trying to play it halfway. Be who you are and be it all the way. Own it. If you're tentative, everyone, including the person you're trying to sell, is going to sense that you are tentative. God, you're salespeople, right? You're supposed to be the aggressive ones. And it bothers me. I'm the marketing guy. I'm supposed to be like the pull it back, don't sell too hard. But I find all the time with modern day salespeople, I'm pushing them. Stop being scared. If your competitor comes up and says, we can do XYZ better than they can, but you truly honestly believe that your product is better, go to the client and say, fine, let's do a head-to-head battle between our two platforms and see who wins. Right? Trust in your product, trust in your R&D team. Unless your R&D team comes to you and says, listen, our product is full of bugs, don't really do that. But at that point, be honest with your clients about it. Our product has some bugs, but here's our product roadmap. Here's when those bugs will be fixed. And when it is fixed, it will work significantly better than anything else you've got.
I think there's two key points here. One is sell the journey, right? Or people want to buy into the journey, right? Which is really interesting because, if you look at any story, the best part of the story is actually the journey. It's not the beginning and it's not the end, right? The happily ever after at the end and, the once upon a time, that part's the real interesting part that always hooks people is like everything was going great. And then, like if you look at let's say the Disney model, but so if you sell the journey based on what you're saying, even if there are problems, people know about that anyway. They expect there's going to be some hiccups along the road. Obviously, they expect that they get what they pay for and hopefully much more than they pay for. But that if you're selling that journey, you're bringing them in on that conversation, you're grouping them in, you create, I think that's something that I definitely don't see enough of, which are these, groups where you've got direct input from customers into product development. People talk about it all the time. They do take feedback when it comes their way, but I don't think companies take, and maybe I'm wrong, right? You're much more on the front lines as a product marketer, but I haven't seen it so common for companies to take such a direct approach to actually sit with clients all the time and say input, and create let's say a Slack channel for that, where those clients could be speaking to each other all the time as well, right? If they were in some
don't be scared of that. Let your clients talk to each other, because a lot of the times you will learn best practices on your own product that can be given to your customer success team by clients talking to each other. I know, for example, and you're saying you haven't heard of it, Wix has a massive council of clients who give them input. Auto Leadstar, which is a startup backed by Aleph Ventures that are based here in Jerusalem, they have a product council. I know that for us, when we develop training modules, we have strategic clients that we go to test new training modules with. And our product team is intimately involved in that conversation. The sales team is intimately involved in that conversation, because what you will learn from those conversations is more than you will learn from any product analytics platform, more than you will learn from any sales conversation. Because the one thing you and I both know is people will lie to you all day long about what their needs are during the sales conversation. But once they're using your product, they don't care anymore, right? There's no purpose in lying. Now they just need to get you on board with whatever they're trying to accomplish, be it accomplishing their KPIs earlier or blowing their KPIs out of the water. Ultimately it always comes back to KPI, but understanding what those KPIs are, how we can make them better to whatever it is, and playing to that. So as a salesperson, understanding, bring them into the conversation, right? One of the things that we love doing at Cyberbit, and something that I was really excited to see our CEO get behind during the beginning of coronavirus, when we saw people starting to move to home. Immediately, we offered up $100,000 in free training. Right, that is a lot of free training. We offered up $100,000 worth of free training, and I got to tell you, there are times I sit on a Zoom session during these free training sessions, especially when we were working from home. My wife can attest to this. We have a huge TV in our living room, and I took my laptop out to the living room. I put it on the table. I casted my Zoom up to my TV. I sat there with a notebook, and I literally watched a 4-hour training session go on. And I will tell you, I did not understand our product until I did that. Because all of a sudden I had a deeper understanding of how the end user is using the product and how that fits into a SOC director or a CISO's KPIs for the year. And all of a sudden you start to understand things in a totally different way. So I would suggest for salespeople, right? Your product team probably has recordings somewhere of someone using your product. They probably have something like a full story, or a hot jar, or all these things that offer this insight. And watch the user recordings. Watch how they use it. Then get on the phone with them and ask them why. Especially if they're a client that you close, they're gonna talk to you, right? By the time you go down that journey, especially if it's an enterprise sale, you guys have been working together for 9, 10, 2 years. If it's in the federal space, you've been working together for a long time, 9, 10 months, whatever it is. You have a relationship. Talk to them and say, listen, I'd just love to learn why you chose our product. In fact, one of the things that we do as standard is after a sales closes, we ask our clients if they're willing to share with us their evaluation of all the vendors that were involved in the pitch. Because we want to understand where we're weak as well. We may have won because we're strong, but it doesn't mean that we didn't have weaknesses along the way, and you want to know what that is. And your product team wants to know what that is. Remember, sales, you're the front line. You understand more than any of us what the client needs are. But if there's no communication internally between sales and product, which is what product marketing is supposed to help with, right? It's one of the things we help with. If there's no conversation between product and sales, then product is going to continue developing what engineers think are cool, and sales is going to continue selling features that don't really matter to a product, or a solution that doesn't really solve because the features aren't aligned to solution.
I mean, that's the second big point, is that, you've got to know your product, right? And I think exactly what you're saying, knowing your product is knowing where it is today, where it's going, how it's being used. That third point is really interesting as well. If more salespeople paid attention to how customers were interacting with the product, that would drastically improve the way that they present it and share it. Because just like you said, right, you're a product marketer, you spent 4 hours watching a live session, and you learned a whole bunch of things that you just hadn't thought of, hadn't seen, to know about, right? That kind of input is massive. And when you're having conversations with people all the time, let's say you're on the sales front lines, you're hearing all sorts of problems, you're hearing all sorts of cases, and you do reach a certain point. I mean, I know that I've reached it a few times where you can connect dots in your head between, hey, I've heard this before with a different customer or whatever, and they had this exact problem, this is how they solved it, or I just had this conversation with a prospect, and this is how we plan to resolve it. I think that that's really important, is that and I think that, exactly what you're sharing, being able to understand why they chose you, what an amazing, you have an exit interview, right, if they leave you, but an interview post-sale, what an amazing experience that is, right? Can you share that information with us? I mean, what an eye-opening treasure trove of information you could see there. One, you see how they see your competitors and how your competitors are at least communicating their positioning, if they share that aspect of it. Two, you see the results of all of your efforts. You kind of see the opposite side of the rug, as it's woven. You see the pattern on one side, you turn it over, you see the other, the complete reverse. You can see all the marketing messaging, all the sales messaging, the work of the customer success team, because of the fact that maybe these people spoke to customers who had read reviews, the product team, because maybe they've done a POC or they've tested it, and now they can say, yep, product checks out, customers are happy. marketing messaging, like, yeah, we see this company as this sales process really smooth, got a lot of confidence, ready to go. I think for me, there's been a few massive gems in this conversation, but this is one of them, right? Why did you choose us, right? Do you mind sharing that? And how many companies would not be willing to share that, right? It's not, I mean, unless it's super private, maybe if it's a federal government or something they can't share,
Even
right?
then,
Yeah.
even then, they will still talk. And one of the things that we do to support our salespeople having that conversation is we have a prepackaged kind of set of items we ask a client for, right? So once the sale is closed and we've gotten them onboarded onto the system and they're using the system, then we go to them and say, we'd like to put your logo on our website. We want to have a press release with you. We'd love to do an interview with you as a blog post and potentially write a case study with you. And chances are they will say no to 3 out of 4 of those items. But it starts a conversation that will open the door to, listen, I know you won't do a case study, but I'd love to understand why you chose us. And even then, or you say, we'll do the case study anonymously. We'll never use your logo. We'll never use your name. We have one of our clients that we just call top 5 bank, right? And we have all their use cases, and we understood from their case study exactly why we were chosen. And we know exactly who we went up against. And it just kind of made the salesperson's life a hell of a lot easier. And we've done this with our federal partners as well. These guys are willing to talk. They just might not have permission to use the company logo or to give a quote. It doesn't mean they don't want to talk with you, because ultimately they also understand that the closer the relationship they have with you, especially as the salesperson, you're going to guard them with your life. You develop a relationship that I've seen salespeople come back into the picture a year post sale where you've already been passed over to customer success, everything. But if I'm having an issue with whatever software product I have and customer success isn't solving it, I go back to the sales guy, because I know that the sales guy is going to step back up and he's going to blow the whole company up going, that's my client, you better not fuck with them. So create that relationship, because ultimately you can then be a part of the year 2, year 3, and potentially also get a part of those commission structures as well from being a part of year 2, year 3, because generally year 1 contract is 1 year. You don't generally get that, that huge $3.5 million 3-year contract off the bat. It takes time.
I agree, and I think that that's an area where people do what you pay them to do, right? And it's just a reality, right? Some people do more than, okay, but many people just do what you pay them to do. And I think that when you incentivize salespeople to close a deal, that's what they focus on. When you incentivize salespeople to keep a customer, that's what they focus on, right? And I've been part of different types of commission structures, and one of those that worked really, really well was that we were incentivized to sign long-term deals, and we were given a residual on those extra years. And anytime any deal, I know for myself, anytime any deal showed any sort of risk, or as in a deal, let's say a customer, right, already signed up, they were unhappy, they were whatever, I was happy to get on a call. I was also regularly, I can tell, just for my background, a little bit of context, I ran a business unit. So I ran the actual opening and closing and keeping, right, as a circuit. And one of the things that I set up, which ties exactly into this, is that customer success would regularly produce updates as to when clients were the happiest, clients that were unhappy, in standard format, but that would come right back to everyone else, and we would reach out to them and try and either on the happiness thing, let's build on that, right? Let's get, if there's referrals, if there's testimonials, if there's case studies, if there's insights. On the unhappiness, how do we fix it, right? If it's just kind of floating, how do we move this kind of customer along? But I think that that's really critical, and I can tell you, just from personal experience, I was talking about this in a previous episode of the PipeCast. Your customers are your Rolodex. This concept that salespeople move from one job to another and just start blank, and they don't think about all the previous companies that they've worked with, is a massive mistake. Especially if, let's say, you've been selling in the cyberspace for years. Okay, some of those companies, at least those relationships, are going to allow you to get in those doors. And it's because you do build these really, really strong relationships. And I think that that's a really critical part, when you look at like product marketing, right? But there's that whole element of like, how do we keep, and that's the message I keep hearing from this, is how do we kind of keep everyone focused on the same task and on the same journey? It doesn't matter if they work for the company or they're a customer of the companies, right? Or a prospect of the companies. It's tying that all together. And I find that really fascinating. And I think that's an amazing insight. I know there are a lot of people right now who could definitely benefit from some of the insights that you've shared, Steve. And I like volunteering other people's time. You've given me a bunch of yours as well. And I was just wondering, if they do want to get in touch with you, right? If they do want to pick your brain, they heard something today that they thought, wow, that was, really insightful. I'd love to set something like that up, whether it's a user, discussion forums, or whether it's about how to position themselves or how to differentiate themselves or how to create more unity inside the team to unify that message, to control that outcome. Where is the best place for them to get hold of you?
Generally, it's on LinkedIn. It tends to be a spot where I'm really active all day. People are welcome to email me as well. So it's Burg, BURG, .Steven, but with a PH, @gmail.com. Reach out to me. Ask me your questions. Sometimes I take like an hour or two to respond, but I generally respond same day. I had a great conversation the other day with a guy who's graduating from Georgetown with his master's, and he just reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm looking for a job to potentially start a career in product marketing. How do I do that? And my first response was, go work in another department for 5 years, figure out all the problems in the company, then go to product marketing. Because product marketing, you tend to be like the fire putter out, you're the firefighter, you're the problem solver. I think one of the things that you touched on, and I just had this thought, and I really wanted to share it. There's nothing wrong with a client being unhappy, right? And it's something that I see all the time, and I see CEOs freak out over it, and I'm really happy that I work for a guy who doesn't. There's nothing wrong with a client being unhappy. It's going to happen, right? You're never going to be able to keep 100% of your clients happy. If you show me a company that's been around for more than 3 years that claims they have a 0% churn, I see a guy who's lying through his teeth. Everyone churns customers. The point is like you were saying, take the unhappy clients and talk to them. Figure out why they're unhappy. Chances are it might be a service level thing. It might be a product level thing, right? I'll give you an example. We were evaluating LMS systems internally for sales training, partner training, things like that. And one of the guys who has since left the company chose a specific LMS system. And they brought me this LMS and said, here's your LMS. Now go start uploading all of our sales materials and build training environments. And I said to them, I took a look at it and I said, guys, you chose an LMS that doesn't accept PowerPoint. And the customer success guy came back to me and said, no, what you have to do is just hit print screen while you're in slideshow mode, take that picture and upload it to our system with all your presenter notes. And ultimately, we've since terminated the contract with them, because on that one sentence and that one response, I went back to the senior people in the company who had signed off and said, there is no way in hell I'm doing this. I have to produce sales content for 8 different verticals within the next month. I'm not also then taking print screens, rewriting all of my presenter notes and setting it up into this new system when I'm not even going to be using it for training because I don't think it's a good system, right? And what all the customer success manager had to do, right? I'm an unhappy client, but it's really easy to turn that around, because what I'm telling him, if he had listened to it, is I'm telling you a feature that your product team needs to know about. You guys need to support PowerPoint. You're an LMS. Everyone makes everything in PowerPoint. I mean, take a look at Powtoon, right? They were just doing simple animation videos 3 years ago until they realized no one wants to make an animation video. They want to animate what they have inside their already existing products. And now they integrate with all of Office 365. and they're fantastic and they're killing it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where people need to realize unhappy customers generally have a reason they're unhappy, and they're exposing a hole in your organization. But salespeople should not be terrified, or customer success managers should not be terrified to share that with their executive team. Because ultimately, instead of being scared and saying, oh my God, they're going to be pissed off that someone's unhappy, the executive team you want to work for is the executive team that says, that's awesome, we never thought of that. Let's get it fixed. Let's get the client on the phone and let them know we're fixing it.
Yep, I agree. I mean, SidePoint Powtoon is a client of ours at Whistle. And I think they have a lot of magical unicorn characteristics that has allowed them to propel the way that they've propelled, right? They've got 26 million customers and counting. And there's a few things that, I've noticed just having paid so close attention because, they're clients of ours. So one is they are extremely responsive to all of their customers and prospects, right? Some of this, it's a mix of B2C and B2B. And if they get comments on Facebook ads, on anything, they're on it. They're on it all the time. They get criticized for being sometimes too pricey, or you miss, like, do you have this feature, whatever. They're always on. I haven't seen one comment that doesn't get a reply. Number one, they're always listening and always responding. Number two, they have excellent systems, excellent internal systems. Everything is very organized. Everyone's very orderly. They are a rocket ship. They move fast. On a rocket ship, things can easily break, right? And I think in order to keep it together, you've got to have all the parts doing exactly what they're doing at the right time. And I think the third thing is a cultural thing. I think you're touching on it as well, right? I mean, you're touching on it when you talk about the way that you were treated as a customer, right? And the company culture that allows for either customers to be unhappy, a company culture that says, well, they're unhappy, they can go, or a company culture that, uses that actually as a resource and says, hey, great, you're unhappy. Let's figure out how to make you happy, or what can we learn from this experience to improve. And I think that is a really, really critical lesson. And we've seen there's all sorts of examples of companies that have succeeded in spite of themselves. Okay, but I think that the best ones do carry some of those traits, and I think that specifically in spaces like this software space, like the startup space, where things are very volatile and it's a super competitive market and lots of pieces are moving really fast. People are trying to eat your lunch all the time. These kind of characteristics that you described, they really do allow you to build a world-class company. And that's what you're doing, right? That's exactly what you're doing. It's part of why you guys raised $70 million in the midst of what hopefully won't be a world recession, but certainly some sort of backturn, right? And it's fascinating. As a person watching from the side, I'm fascinated by it. It's one of the things that prompted me to reach out to you, other than obviously the fact that we have met a bunch of times before and I've always found you very insightful. But I think that, these kinds of points are so, so important. And that's what makes starting a company and building a company and working in a company so fascinating. And what makes the startup world so fascinating, right, is that it's so dynamic. I think it's been an awesome experience chatting with you, Steve. I appreciate every minute of your time today.
No, it's awesome. I love every time you